seek to promote diplomacy over violence, hope. As responsible global players, Ireland, Norway and Spain will always seek to promote diplomacy over violence, hope over despair, and cooperation over exclusion. And that is why all three of us have supported the Ukrainian peace plan. And it is also why we are supporting the Arab peace vision. We will continue our engagement with all parties to this end.
Querido José Manuel, dear Micheál, I'm really happy to stand here together with you, and I want to start by thanking both of you for this very close cooperation, for taking this step together. Norway recognizes the state of Palestine effective from tomorrow. We do that because it's the right thing to do, but even more importantly, because it's the right time to do it. For many years, we and so many other countries were expecting to recognize at the end of a peace process where everything else was in place. But then a few years ago, we realized that we actually needed to think outside the box and maybe recognize at the time when it will give a strong impulse, a strong signal into a process. And since then, we have been looking for that moment. Some people might think it sounds paradoxical to talk about the two-state solution in the midst of war. Right now, we have extreme violence in Gaza. We have Israelis living in fear of terrorism and rocket attacks, and we have settler violence and the expansion of illegal settlements in the West Bank. We are now seeing a cycle of violence. This is a low point in the long and sad history of a non-solution to the Israel-Palestine problem, a problem that has existed since we were among the earliest countries to recognize Israel, a country that we staunchly support and will continue to support. We have argued that we also need to deal with the Palestinian issue, and that the way to do that is to create a state for Palestinians, and that the people of Israel and the people of Palestine will be better off living in two states peacefully in a negotiated manner where they can thrive, develop their economy and culture in each state, and then cooperate on that basis. This was the vision of the Madrid conference in '91. This was the vision of the Oslo process. And since then, we have been working steadily to promote that idea. The idea of Oslo was to start building the state bottom up, to build the institution of a Palestinian state. And then within 5 years, from '93, the idea was to have a final settlement where also border, status of Jerusalem, status of refugees and security issues were managed. This did not happen. I think we did not really realize that because we were negotiating at the time with people like Isaac Rabin, Shimon Peres and Yasser Arafat, we did not really take into account that there could be other forces who really didn't want this, and there were too much space for sabotaging the development towards a credible two-state solution. So this whole vision remains, but it needed an update. I think what we're giving now is a new software. It's a 2.0 to that vision, where earlier recognition of Palestine is but one of the several pieces of the big puzzle of how to bring peace to the Middle East. Yesterday, as was mentioned by my colleagues, there were two important meetings leading into today's important meeting. First, we had the partner meeting between the donors to the Palestine Authority and the new Prime Minister of Palestine, Mr. Mohammed Mustafa, who for 7 weeks now have been leading a new Palestinian government, more technocratic and a modern government, which is really trying to deal with the outstanding issues of service delivery, of how to be able to provide the Palestinian people in the areas where they are in control with basic services, but also necessary reforms. We have great trust in Mohammed Mustafa's work to that effect, and he also spoke about ideas of how to get back to Gaza, because I think almost everybody begins to realize that we need a governance structure also for Gaza, and that should be embedded in the Palestine Authority in this upgraded form. Later in the evening, the three of us attended a meeting that I chaired together with Prince Faisal, the Foreign Minister of Saudi Arabia, in this Euro-Arab group of countries, which is now growing in membership, in quotation marks. It's not a formal entity, but we had 38 countries and 3 institutions, the European Union, the Arab League, and the Organization for Islamic Cooperation, and a large number of European and Arab foreign ministers. We are working together to develop the idea of a regional peace plan that has something for everyone, a Palestinian state, but also normalization between Saudi Arabia and other Arab states with Israel, strengthening of the PA, demobilization of non-state armed groups, and a credible path forward. Out of that came strong support for the idea that one day there has to be a conference on the implementation of a two-state solution, because precisely because we are in this low point in history when it comes to the Middle East, it is exactly when you need to think about the day after. There's an imperative, which is to get to a ceasefire. There is another imperative, which is to radically upgrade the humanitarian efforts. But neither of these are actually solutions. The solutions have to be political, and we need to think about that political solution now. That is the context in which Spain, Ireland, and Norway chose to recognize. We encourage other countries to do the same. We know that a number of European countries are either on the way to do so or contemplating, and we hope they will follow suit. But the main point from our side was to send a strong signal into this process that we cannot just be stuck with the way we wanted to do this in the 1990s. We have to realize where we are. We are in 2024, and we need to upgrade this long-standing vision of a peaceful settlement in the Middle East, a Palestinian state living beside an Israeli state, both governed in a way where they can work well together. And this is a handshake and a support and an expression of solidarity to the moderate forces, those who want to continue to go on the non-violent way. And it's absolutely a move that wants to underline that this cycle of violence has to be broken and that we need another path for the Middle East. I am encouraged by the fact that everybody present in both these meetings support the idea of a two-state solution. Everybody agrees that we need to move there and have to start thinking of how to get there, even if there are different views on the exact moment of recognition. But this train is now in motion, and the three of us together have actually, I believe, helped set it in motion together with so many other people who want a different outcome for the Palestinians and for the Israelis.
Hi, Daniel Rovirosa from the Spanish news agency EFE. I will take my question in Spanish for the Spanish minister. Buenos días, ministro. Quería saber si tras el ataque de esta madrugada de Israel a un campo de desplazados de Rafah y el vídeo de ayer de Israel a los tres países, si han acordado hoy tomar alguna medida contra Israel. Gracias.
Sí, muchas gracias. Buenos días. Hemos estado hablando de ello en la reunión previa y hemos estado de acuerdo en lo inaceptable que es ese vídeo, la filmación de nuestros embajadores que fueron convocados conjuntamente y que, por lo tanto, pues desde luego en algún momento habrá que expresar esa opinión que tenemos de rechazo a algo que no está dentro de la cortesía diplomática y de los usos de la Convención de Viena de Relaciones Diplomáticas. Pero al mismo tiempo también hemos estado de acuerdo en que no vamos a caer en ninguna provocación que nos aleje de nuestro objetivo. Nuestro objetivo es reconocer mañana el Estado de Palestina, hacer todos los esfuerzos posibles para conseguir el alto el fuego permanente lo antes posible y también al final que llegue esa paz definitiva. Eso es en estos momentos lo que nos concentra, lo importante y lo que ha centrado nuestra conversación en la reunión anterior. Y el ataque al que señalaba, yo creo que lo que hace es subrayar aquello que la Corte Internacional de Justicia ha indicado. Y quiero recordar que las medidas cautelares, como todas las decisiones de la Corte Internacional de Justicia, son obligatorias para todas las partes. Y es que Israel tiene que detener su ofensiva en Rafah. De la misma forma y con la misma contundencia que condenamos el lanzamiento de cohetes por parte de Hamas hacia Israel.
I'm Alf Johnson from VG Norwegian Daily. We've seen that Israel is continuing their attacks against Rafah yesterday and overnight, which was ordered to stop by the court in Den Haag last week. So how could we expect that your countries would react for Israel to live up to the court order? Thank you.
Well, I think all three of us for months have been saying that we're worried that the Israeli style of warfare in Gaza has been in breach of international humanitarian law. Now we know, because now we've had a compulsory order from the International Court of Justice ordering Israel to stop its attack in Rafah. This is compulsory, it's binding, which means that continuing warfare in Rafah is in material breach of a decision of the highest court of the world. We expect that Israel will follow international law and do what has been said. And in principle, it's up to the Security Council to enforce if there is a flagrant violation of international law.
Could I say that, first of all, again, all of this was predicted. All the UN agencies and humanitarian groups that I met predicted that any military operation in Rafah would have dire consequences for the population in Gaza. And that is exactly what is happening right now. This is on top of the hunger, on top of the starvation, the refusal to allow aid in sufficient volumes. But what we witnessed last night is barbaric. Gaza is a very small enclave, densely populated conurbation. One cannot bomb an area like that without shocking consequences in terms of innocent children and civilians. And we would urge Israel to stop now in terms of the military operation in Rafah. We need an immediate ceasefire, we need the unconditional release of all hostages, and we need a massive surge in aid into Gaza. From our perspective as three countries, and indeed the European Union itself, we are strong supporters of multilateralism and of the multilateral institutions and of international humanitarian law. And we have to robustly defend and uphold the independence of the International Court of Justice and indeed the ICC. And I think this is a moment in time in global affairs where the essential centrality, if you like, of these institutions must be upheld and their independence. And it has been a tendency of Israel to undermine UN institutions, but also to undermine the international humanitarian legal system. And the court's ruling is binding. It's extremely important that we stand up for the independence of the court and support the court in this vital matter.
Can I just add one reflection which I think is essential here, which is that there is a perception in large parts of the world of double standards, that rules are applied to some but not everybody. I think that critique is founded on some realities, and I understand why that perception has been created, and that perception undermines the credibility of the international legal system in general. So it's a serious problem for all of us. Because the impression created is that these norms are does not apply to everybody, and many people will say then they do not apply to anyone. So I think this is also standing up for the principles that we have agreed to in the world. Remember, the International Court of Justice is everybody's court. The ICC is 124 countries, but the International Court of Justice is the principal organ of the UN. Every member of the UN is bound by the decision of the International Court of Justice.
Yesterday's bombing is one more day with innocent Palestinian civilians being killed. This stresses what we have been calling, the three of us, our three countries, for a long time, that it's an immediate ceasefire. But the gravity is even larger because it comes after a decision taken by the International Court of Justice that, once again, I want to recall, that are binding and compulsory for all parties, therefore for Israel, that is calling to stop this attack on Rafah. I think that this time we have to raise our voice not only for an immediate ceasefire, but also to back international law and the United Nations Charter. I want to recall that the International Court of Justice, it's a founding body of the United Nations Charter. We are going to have a Foreign Affairs Council of Ministers of Foreign Affairs of the European Union, and I'm going to ask the other 26 partners to declare the backing to the ICJ, to its decision, and also if Israel continues to pursue against that opinion of the International Court of Justice, that we try to take the right measure to enforce that decision and to back one of the most important bodies of the UN Charter.
Thank you. And one last question, Tony.
Thank you very much. Taoiseach, Irish Minister for Foreign Affairs, first of all, we saw the response of the Israeli government to the declaration last week of all three countries recognising the state of Palestine. We saw what some people have said was the humiliation of the Irish ambassador in Israel. I mean, do you think that that was done? And also we've seen the social media videos that were promoted by the Israeli foreign minister. Do you think that was done to try and discourage other EU member states from following suit? And are you hopeful that other member states could follow suit? And just to follow up on the last question, do you think if Israel does not comply with the ICJ decision of last week that sanctions should now be considered? Thank you.
Well, first of all, as I've said, the behaviours of the Israeli government in response to our decision to recognise the state of Palestine, I don't believe reflected well on Israel, and I think was outside diplomatic norms in terms of how our diplomats were treated. And we will be communicating that directly to the Israeli government and to Foreign Minister Katz in particular. I've always treated people with respect, particularly diplomats who represent their governments and who are there to communicate respective positions on given situations. So we're very clear that we want to maintain diplomatic relations with Israel. Our measure and our decision is based on peace, as we've articulated, and a genuine view in terms of how strategically this issue can be progressed in terms of towards a two-state solution, Israelis and Palestinians living harmoniously together. So we're not going to be in any way sort of diverted away from the core objective of our decision to recognise a state of Palestine. I do expect that others will follow our decision to recognise Palestine. I don't wish to reference any country. That's a matter for other member states of the European Union. But I do believe others will follow. And thirdly, I do believe it's a very serious moment in terms of multilateralism and the multilateral system. The International Court of Justice has ordered Israel to stop. And I think that is fundamental in terms of how we all in the international community respond, including the European Union. It is in the context of a major conflict right now. Our immediate focus has to be the ending of the bombardment of Gaza, a ceasefire, the release of hostages, and a massive surge of humanitarian aid. But I think, as José and Espen have said, we have to strongly uphold the international humanitarian legal system, and there has to be consistency in terms of how we apply it in Ukraine and elsewhere, and in terms of how we apply it in the context of this war on Gaza.